The introduction of Genesis, part 4, from the beginning onwards. In Genesis chapter 33, we see that Esau is filled with the contempt against his brother Jacob. Because of that reason, we see that Jacob ran away to his uncle's home, Paddebada. And again, Jacob was coming back from Paddebada to his native town, guided by the Lord. And in that way, God called on Jacob at the place called Mahanaim. As he came to know that his brother Esau was chasing him with 400 men, he decided to divide his flock and his children and his wives into groups. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two female servants, and stayed himself back at the valley of Ebok. This is what we have already seen and discussed. And in the very next morning, Jacob lifted up his eyes and saw that Esau, his brother, was coming with 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two female servants. And he put the servants with their children in advance, and then Leah with her children. And finally, Rachel and Joseph followed them. And he himself went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near his brother. At first, Jacob was very much afraid that he was going to be killed by his brother Esau. However, we see in contrary, Esau ran to meet Jacob, he embraced him, kissed him, and fell on his neck and wept. This is really a wonderful thing between Jacob and Esau. After that, we see that Esau made an inquiry about the people around Jacob, and Jacob answered that the children whom God has given him graciously to his servant. And the servants and their children drew near and bowed down. And Jacob wanted to give a special gift to his brother, a special lamb. At first, Esau was found to refuse it, and saying that he had enough for himself and keep for himself what he had. But on the compulsion of Jacob, he had taken that gift for himself. At first, Jacob, before going to meet his brother Esau, thought that he was going to be killed by his brother because of revenge. But our God is a wonderful God who could transform the enemy into a friend. Therefore, on seeing his brother, Esau ran to him, kissed him, embraced him, fell on his neck, and wept for him. And there was a peace and answer between them. And we will see this in the chapter 33 of Genesis. Jacob said to his brother, I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God. And I have found a favor in you, therefore, please accept my present. And God had mercy on me, therefore, I have much enough with me. And Esau responded positively and said, Let's go ahead, my brother. But Jacob pleaded his brother Esau to go before him and he will follow him slowly because the flock and the herds are small enough and they are fed with milk. If they are driven hard for one day, all of them will die. In that way, they reconciled with each other. And Esau said that he had 400 men with him. If necessary, Jacob shall take the help of them. But Jacob refused the offer smoothly. And Esau returned to his native town on the way to Shear, whereas Jacob journeyed towards Sukkot and built himself a house and boats to his livestock. Therefore, the name of the place is called Sukkot. And Jacob was found to come to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, on his way from Padan. Here, Sukkot means tents. So there he erected an altar and called it El Elohi Israel. And we understand that Sukkot means tents here. And the chapter 34 in Genesis is a tearful and a painful chapter in the life of Jacob. We see that his daughter Dinah went into the city of Shechem alone by herself to see the woman of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Homer, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman and spoke to her tenderly. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, Get me this girl for my wife. Jacob understand that his daughter was raped, humiliated, and insulted, but he remained silent. And all his sons are at work in the field. And Hamor was found to come to Jacob to talk about this marriage. But Jacob didn't want to talk to him about this, and he said to him, when his sons came, he would talk about it. And Hammer was found to come up with an offer and the solution of this problem, saying that Jacob and his family could settle over there by marrying each other. And he also came up with an offer that he would give anything, whatever he wanted. And Levi and Shimron came from the field. They came to know about the problem. They came to know that their sister was raped. They answered that they were not going to give their sister to them because those people were uncircumcised, for they couldn't help until they got circumcised. The moment they were circumcised, they could marry among themselves, and they could get married among themselves. And we see that Shechem and Hamor accepted this, and all the people in that city got circumcised. And at that very moment, Levi and Shimron were found to enter that village and cut off their necks and kill them. At this juncture, Jacob was afraid. He was very much surprised. I'm sorry, he was very much afraid and said to his sons, My sons, why have you done this? Because they are very strong and they have a great strength, so that they might kill us. And Shimron and Levi replied that this is what the revenge against them, my father, because they humiliated our sister. So they have seized that city and stolen everything from there. And we see in the 35th chapter of Genesis, God again appeared to Jacob, saying that he should return to Bethel again and make an altar for God. So Jacob said to his household, to all who were with him, Put away the foreign gods who are among you, purify yourselves and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, so that I may make there an altar to the God who answers me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods that they had, and Jacob was found to hide them under the terebinth tree that was near Shechem. And as they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. If we observe that God is always with Jacob wherever he moves. In 28th chapter of Genesis, Jacob's moving to Padanaram and moving to Haran, and after that visiting of Bethel, and even he is protected in his uncle's home for so many times, and even Laban was rebuked by God for Jacob while returning to his native home. And in such a way, God has continued to save him and protect him always. Whenever Jacob felt trouble, and whenever Jacob went into depression, God was with him and guided him and taught him and made him walk on his path. And Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, along with his people. And there he built an altar and called the place El Bethel, because there God had revealed himself to him when he fled from his brother. And here we see that Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, was found to be dead and was buried under an oak tree below Bethel. And so he called its name Alan Becketh. And we see that God again appeared to Jacob when he came from Aram and blessed him. And God said to him, "Your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name." So he called his name Israel. And God said to him, "I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. And I will give you the land which is given to your father Abraham and Isaac." And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone, and he poured out a drink offering on it, and poured oil on it. So Jacob called the name of the place where God had spoken to him is Bethel. Then they journeyed from Bethel. When they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel went into labor and gave birth to a son called Benjamin. And she died because of the hard labor. So Rachel died and she was buried on the way to Ephrath. And in verse 22, while Israel lived in that land, Reuben, the elder son of Jacob, went and lay with Bilhah, the servant of Rachel, his father's concubine. When Israel heard about it, he was very much depressed. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah or Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel or Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, the servant of Rachel, or Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Jilpah, the servant of Leah, or Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padanaram. And Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre, where Abraham and Isaac defeated Midian in the country of Moab. So, in the 25th chapter, we see that Abraham died, Isaac and Ishmael buried him. And in the chapter 35, we see that Isaac died, Jacob and Esau buried him. In the 36th chapter of Genesis, we find the lineage of Adam and even the lineage of Esau, from which the kings came. And we also see that this 36th chapter is completely meant for Esau's life. And his story is clearly explained in the chapter 36. It speaks about his family details and how they lived in a sheer temple and how their children grew up. And we see that Esau had three wives, namely Ada, Ahalibama, Basmat. So the history is about the children who came out of these three wives and how they grew up as leaders is written clearly in 36th chapter. And in the 37th chapter, we see that Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings. And we also see that the explanation of Jacob's lineage. And more importantly, we see that the important factors about Joseph's life, which is thoroughly explained in 37 and 38th chapter of Genesis. And in 38th chapter, we also see that the history of Judah, the son of Jacob and Leah. In chapter 37, we see that when Joseph was a boy of 17 years old, he used to bring the bad report of his brothers to his father. So his brothers felt jealous at him. Here, Israel seemed to love Joseph more than any other of his sons because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors and became a sweet memory of his wife Rachel. So he loved him so much, more than anything else. Hence, all his brothers turned angry against him, as Jacob loved Rachel very much. So Joseph is a sweet memory of Rachel. And here we see that Joseph used to have dreams more frequently. Because of that dreams, he was hated much by his brothers. And now Joseph had a dream and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. The dream was when they were binding sheaves in the field, and to their surprise, his sheaf arose and stood upright, and their sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to his sheaf. He also had another dream and told it to his brothers. The sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to him. And here we understand that God's plan was exhibited through that. And hence his brothers will be his servants and depend on him. They could not understand the purpose and the intention of these dreams. And all the brothers started hating him and feeling jealous at him. When his father Jacob came to know about this, he rebuked his son Joseph and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and brothers come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" He said. His brothers became jealous at him, but his father kept in his mind. So we should also keep in the words of God without the ignorance. The God who spoke to Jacob in those days, the same God is talking to us. When his brothers went to feed the flocks in the Shechem, Israel called Joseph and told him that he should bring a word from his brothers if they are well. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron and came to Shechem. And he made an inquiry over there about his brothers and came to know that they went to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. He was already filled with rage and contempt. His brothers conspired against him and wanted to kill him before Joseph drew near them. And they said to one another, "See, here comes the dreamer. Let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal had killed him and devoured him. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands. And he said to them, let us throw him in the pit instead of killing him in the wilderness. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit where there is no water. But then they sat down to eat. They saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and the meat on their way to carry it down to Egypt. The Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. So they lifted their brother from out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. And let us see how God's plan is being fulfilled over this. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. And we see that Reuben came to the pit and found that the pit was empty, and he started weeping over it of his lost brother. And where is this boy, and where shall I go now? He said. Then they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood, and brought it to their father's identification. Then Jacob identified his son's Joseph's robe and found his heart broken into pieces, saying that a fierce animal had killed his son Joseph, and started mourning, and he mourned for many days for his son. Then no one was able to comfort him, and he refused to be comforted, saying that he would go down to Sheol to his son. No one was able to comfort him. Meanwhile, Midianites sold him away to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh in Egypt. So, in the chapter 38, we will see the matter at the house of Potiphar. Meanwhile, the philosophers, those who have produced the Holy Bible, have written the history of Judah. And if it was not written, we would surely fail to know who Jesus was and through whom Jesus came. So basically, the chapter 38 in Genesis will speak about the Judah's history. If we go into the verses, when it happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to certain Adullamite, whose name was Hira. And there Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. He took her and went into her, and she was conceived, and she bore a son called Er. When she was conceived in the second time, she bore a son called Onan. And when she was conceived for the third time, she bore another son called Shelah. And Jodah was in Kejib when she bore him. And it is found that Jodah took a wife for her, and her name was Tamar. But Jodah's firstborn was found to be wicked in the sight of God. Therefore, the Lord put him to death. Then Jodah asked his second son Onan to go into Er's wife and give her a child. But Onan knew that the offspring would not belong to him. So whenever he went into his brother's wife, he would waste the semen on the ground. So it was found wicked in the sight of God, and he was put to death. Then Judah told Tamar that she should remain in her father's house until Shelah his son grew up. for he feared that he would die like his brothers. So Tamar went and remained in her father's house. And in the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died, and Judah was comforted. When Tamar was told that her father-in-law was going up to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, and sat at the entrance of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. When Judah saw her, he thought that she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Then he asked her to let him come into her. Then she said, "What will you give me that you may come in to me?" Then he answered, "I will send you a young goat from the flock." She said, "Please provide me some proof of that until you send me the goat." She continued, "The proof of his signet, his cord, and his staff, that is, in his hands." So he gave them to her and went unto her. Then she arose and went away. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend, he did not find her on the way, for there was no woman who was doing prostitution over there. And about 3 months later, Judah came to know that Tamar was conceived. And Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burnt on fire for her immorality." As she was being brought out, she sent a word for her father-in-law, saying that by the man whom this belong, I am pregnant. And she said, "Please identify whose these are, the signet, the cord, and the staff." Judah identified and said, "She is more righteous than I." When the time of her labor came, there were twins in her womb. When she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out. So his name was called Perij. Now we understand that the lineage of Perij, the Lord Jesus came. So, if it was not explained or mentioned over here, we would surely fail to know about Jesus' lineage. And in the 39th chapter of Genesis, we see that Joseph, after he was sold to Ishmaelites, were found to return to Egypt. And they gave Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian. Here we should recognize God's plan. Those who are in His plan will be protected by Him carefully and most personally. And we see that the Lord was with Joseph. So, because of Joseph, the house of Potiphar was blessed and fruitful. So, Joseph found favor in the sight of Potiphar. And because of Joseph, Potiphar's family continued to be blessed. But something has happened in the Potiphar's house. When Potiphar's wife found Joseph, who was handsome and beautiful in appearance, tried to persuade him and asked him to lay with her. But Joseph, being righteous in the sight of God, refused to do it, saying that his master has no concern about anything in that house except his wife. And he was given a charge of everything over there except his wife. So he was not supposed to do that wicked thing and sin against God. And he could not stand against his master. But she continued to persuade him to lay with her and share a bed with her. However, one day he went into the house to do some work, for there is no one at home. She caught him by his garments and asked him to share a bed with her. But Joseph refused it. Leaving his garments, he got out of the house. At the very moment, she called to the men of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us." And added that Joseph came to her and forced her to lie with him. And she cried with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted my voice, he left his garments beside me and left the house, she said. So when her husband came, she narrated this beautiful and deceitful story to him. When Potiphar heard about this, his anger was kindled. So Joseph was ordered to be arrested and kept in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph wherever he was and showed his mercy and love on him. So Joseph gained the favor from the keeper of the prison. So he made Joseph in charge of all the prisoners. So the prison became a house to him. And when we come to the chapter 40 of Genesis, Joseph has got an opportunity to come out of the prison and he got a chance to prove himself. We see in the chapter 40 of Genesis, which says, sometime after this, the cupbearers of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord and the king of Egypt, and they were kept in prison and continued some time in the custody. As it is so, they had a dream in one night. They both had a dream at the same time. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were very much troubled and disturbed. He asked them why they were disturbed. They told him that they had a dream and they found no one to interpret. So the chief cupbearer told him that there was a vine before him and there were three branches on the vine. As soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth and the clusters ripened into grapes. And continued that Pharaoh's cups in his hand, and he took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed in his hand. And Joseph made out an interpretation of the dream, saying that three branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh would lift you up and will restore you to the office. And Joseph asked him to mention about him when he met Pharaoh, but he seemed to forget about it. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he also told his own dream. The dream was there were three cake baskets on his head. In the uppermost basket, there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but birds were eating it out of the basket on his head. Then Joseph answered and said, the three baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from you. This is what the meaning of your dream, Joseph said. So it was on the third day, which was on the Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But unfortunately, he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, and he forgot him. And Joseph had to spend 2 years in the prison itself. And after 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the river Nile, and from out of the river there came up the seven strong and attractive cows, and they fed in the reed grass. And at the same time, there were seven other 7 cows, which were ugly and thin, came up out of the Nile. And it was found that the ugly, thin cows ate up and swallowed up the 7 strong and attractive cows. His heart was very much troubled, and again he fell asleep and he dreamed a second time. It is believed that there are 7 years of grain, plump and good, were growing on the stack, and after that they are sprouted 7 year thin and blighted by the east wind, and they are found to swallow up the 7 plump foliars. Pharaoh couldn't understand what was it all about, so his heart was very much troubled. He woke up in the morning and found that it was a dream. And then he sent a word for all the magicians in Egypt and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but no one could interpret them. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today, my lord. There is one man who could interpret the meaning of the dreams, who is now in prison, whose name is Joseph. And as per the word of Pharaoh, they sent for Joseph to bring in. And Joseph was released and was made to wear the new garments and was brought to Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, saying, I had a dream when I was in sleep, but no one was able to interpret the meaning of that dream. But I heard that you are able to make a meaning of these dreams. So I sent a word for you, he said. Then Joseph replied that it's not because of him, but God would give Pharaoh a favorable answer. And then Joseph revealed the meaning of the dreams. Joseph said to Pharaoh, my king, God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do and what he is going to do. And God showed him what he was going to do for the people of the nation. The meaning of the two dreams are one and same. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good years are 7 years. And there comes 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. But after that, there will be 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume all the land of Egypt. Therefore, he told him to take care of the people of the land and his future. And this proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, there is none like you in the land of Egypt, because no one was able to make out the meaning of the dreams. Surely there is a God in you. So you are wise and discerning than anyone else in the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in the garments of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck, and made him ride on his second chariot. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name as Japhanath Paneah, and he was sent to marry Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. So Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt on the chariot. And during the 7 plentiful years, the earth produced abundantly, and Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. Before the year of famine came to, two sons were born to Joseph, and Joseph called the name of his firstborn Manasseh, and the second son's name is Ephraim, for God has made him fruitful. If God has chosen people, they will be surely flourished and fruitful and be blessed. And when all the years of plentiness is gone, and famine days started, as Joseph said, and there was famine in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. So, when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth. And when Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, saying, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us, there that we may live and not die. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt, but Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers. So the son of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Therefore the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but they did not recognize him. So he treated them strangely and spoke roughly to them, because it has been 20 years since Joseph left Canaan. He left Canaan at the age of 17. Therefore, he is now 37 years old. So we see that he came here at the age of 17, and after 13 years he became the prime minister. So that now these people are seeing him at the age of 37 as an officer, therefore they could not recognize him. And they saw Joseph and said, Lord, we are your servants. So they have bowed down themselves to the ground before Joseph. And Joseph said to them, You are spies? You have come to see the nakedness of the land, he said. They said, No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food, and we are all sons of one man. We are honest men, and we are 12, and your servants have never been spies, they said. We have father, and we are 12, and one is with our father, and one more is no more, they said. Therefore Joseph said to them that he should test whether they are speaking true or false. So Joseph said to them, Send one of you and let him bring your brother, while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. And not knowing what to do at this juncture, they have continued to murmur among themselves. And they were talking among themselves, In truth, we are guilty concerning your brother, in that we see the distress of his soul. When he begged us, we did not listen to him. This is why this distress has come upon us. As they were murmuring among themselves in this way, Joseph understood their words, because he is bilingual. And we see that he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. And we understand that it is in Egypt If anybody is bound, he is nothing but killing. But they do not know the plan of Joseph, and he was doing everything according to his plan. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and money. And their bags were filled with grain and money. They couldn't recognize it. Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed from there. And as one of them opened the sack to give his donkey fodder at the halting place, he saw the money in the mouth of the sack. On seeing this, all of them got trembled, and their hearts sank because every sack of them was filled with grain and money. And they couldn't recognize and understand how that has all happened to them. When they came to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, "The man, the lord of the land, spoke roughly to us and took us to be spies of the land, and commanded us to bring the youngest one with us when we go back." And they took Simeon into custody until we show the youngest one among us to them. And Jacob, their father, said to them, "You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more. Now you will take Benjamin. All this has come against me, and I don't understand what you are doing." And now the famine was severe in the land, and when they had eaten the grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again, buy us a little food." But Judah said to him, "My father, the man seriously warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you some food.'" So they have taken the acceptance of their father and taking Benjamin and returning to Egypt, because many of them are about to die with famine, for they have no food for so many days. Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be so, then do one thing. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags and carry a present down to the man, a little balm and a little honey, gum, meat, pistachio nuts, and almonds, and take double the money with you, and carry back with you the money that was written in the mouth of the sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. And take also your brother and go to that man," he said. So they went down to Egypt with their brother Benjamin, and they met Joseph and stood before him. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of the house, "Bring the men into the house, and slaughter an animal and make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon." The man has done as Joseph told him, and brought the men to Joseph's house. And the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, "It is because of the money which was replaced in our sacks the first time that we are brought in, so that he may assault us and call upon us to make us servants and seize our donkeys." So they went up to the steward of Joseph's house, and spoke with him at the door of the house, and said, "O my lord, we came down the first time to buy food, and we came to the lodging place. We opened our sacks, and there was each man's money in the mouth of his sack, so our money in full weight. So we have brought it again with us to return." And the man replied to them, saying, "Peace be with you, do not be afraid. It is your God, and the God of your father has put a treasure in your sacks for you. I received my money." And then he brought Simeon out to them. So we understand that Joseph has already paid money for his brothers. So he loved them so much. And when the had brought the men into Joseph's house and given them water, and they had washed their feet, when he had given their donkeys fodder, they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they should eat the bread over there. When Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the present that they had with them, and bowed down to him to the ground. And he inquired about his father and their welfare, and said to them, "Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive?" He asked them. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son," he said. Then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother, and he sought a place to weep. He wept loudly and washed his face and came again. And controlling himself, he said, "Serve the food." And here we see that the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians would not generally eat with Hebrews, for that is an abomination for Egyptians, and they don't even eat with Israelites and Hebrews. Actually, they should be served separately. But Joseph, and they sat before him the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked at each other in amazement. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table. But Benjamin's portion is 5 times higher than the others. And they drank and were merry with him. And finally, the family is reunited. So, this is the happiest moment of Joseph's life. This is what the basic history of Joseph until he came to Egypt. And chapter 43 of Genesis has discussed all these things.